Welcome back. I want to recap on what spinal stability is. So, your posture is a reflection of how your brain is functioning. When we're checking you standing or laying or doing neurological tests, it's all to see what the structure is doing and how it's affecting the neurological system. So, a lot of times we have pain and we don't necessarily feel what's going on, and that's because the spine has a lot of mechanoreception. Proprioception is good at moving and knowing where it is in space and communicating with the brain, but it doesn't have a lot of nociception, ability to feel pain. Same with ligaments and joints and discs. Don't have a lot of nociception, that sensory pain. They sense other things. They have a lot of nerves. Mechanoreception is one of them, and that's the mechanics of breathing, stimulating those joints and discs by getting that big breath all the way down to the tailbone. So what is spinal stability? It's strengthening the posterior chain. So we'll get into exactly what that means. But essentially, the spine has a lot of movement. We just abuse that motion instead of actually truly using our hips and shoulders to do a lot of the movement. And then we'll get aches and pains elsewhere outside the spine, even though the spine can have a lot of degeneration. So movement necessarily isn't the fix. It's how we're moving. So battling the basics means not necessarily working on easy things. It's the things we do most often. And retraining ourselves is hard because we've been taught to move a certain way. So exercise should strengthen the things we do most often. Movement should improve how we feel and not be destructive. And if what we're doing every day makes us feel worse, we have to wonder if we're doing things correctly. So what do? We perform an average of 30,000 breaths a day, 4,000 steps, sit 6.5 hours, and bend 4,000 times a day. Can we improve on these things? Can we train ourselves to improve on these things? Do we have to untrain ourselves as well? Yes, we do. So spinal stability, it's looking at the posterior chain. Another word for this is the transversal spinalis muscles. I think you'll agree, posterior chain is easy to remember. Multifidus is one of the big muscles here because it crosses several segments. It can cross up to 3 or 4 segments of the vertebrae. And it encases the whole spine. You might notice that we feel this canal. The spinous process is what sticks out right here. These guys, little bumps, those are on the dorsal side. Those little spikes. So we're running the canal on either side of them. That's where all these muscles should be. A lot of time they're atrophied. That means they're weak. We don't feel the tone like we should. So they're not actually supporting the spine. They're not protecting the discs and the joints and these yellow things, which are the nerve roots, which ultimately the spinal cord and the nerve roots can all be affected by the atrophy in the posterior chain and that lack of engagement. That decompression breathing we did, something that really activates those muscles, wakes them up, protects the joints. So anytime you're doing these exercises, I want you to think lengthening, decompress, breathe. These are the things I repeat in my classes. And if it hurts, reset. If you're getting sacroiliac joint pain or something, you're not holding yourself correctly. And sometimes standing isn't the best way to start. It's either sitting or that kneeling anchor we did. That helps people really feel that anchoring of the hips and allows them to actually work on that decompression. Because as soon as we stand, we tend to tap into our old habits, and that works against us. Compress the hips and the shoulders into the sockets. It's something we'll explore more, but it's almost the opposite idea. Like we're going to decompress the spine, and to help us do that, you might notice that the anchoring, that compressing into the hip, and the same with the shoulders, and another anchoring, if you will, actually really helps you with that decompression process. I like to think about like squeezing a tube of toothpaste, comes out the end. Maybe that doesn't work for you, but that's the image I like. You must unlearn what you have learned. Master Yoda. Probably didn't say it as good as he did, but that's the biggest problem. We're taking these ideas of extension or squeezing the shoulder blade, pushing the hips forward, all these things that work against us. We need to kind of let those go when we're working on these new exercises. Spinal stability is more about mobilization and less about, it's more about strengthening and less about mobilization. So it's kind of the opposite of yoga. Yoga, you're trying to get deeper into the position, stretch everything. with spinal stability, we're trying to strengthen, find that tension earlier and earlier in the position. Like I said, the exercises should get harder because your intention's changing. You're finding the wall earlier. The wall is hard to describe. When you know it, when you feel it. Essentially, if we think about like a bicep, tricep, if you're overworking your bicep, it becomes shortened, right? It's going to inhibit its antagonist muscle, which is the tricep, which extends the elbow. So a shortened muscle is obviously going to affect the joint above and below it, and that reverberates throughout the whole body. We have that same idea in our spine, in our hips. So the hips are chronically turned out. There's muscles that are weak and inhibited that help turn them in. So the wall is when you're stretching that tight muscle and you're activating the weak muscle at the same time. So it's an active stretch. And that's where that shake starts to happen. It's a whole body tremor. And that the breath should feel really restricted. So that's an important point there. A little difference between spinal stability and yoga. Big difference, actually. They're on polar opposites, really. Retraining our muscles to support a decompressed stance. Yoga doesn't really do that, right? Yoga is about mobility of the spine. We're about lengthening the spine, holding in that position, training our muscles to do that more often. Hips and shoulders work best when they are in the sockets like we talked about, and that's going to get us proper range of motion. Isolated motion in the shoulders, not just shoulder blade and spine and neck helping out. It's that length and state. You'll notice that's really hard to move your arms in those positions like we're doing the trace. That'll get harder and harder as you get better at that isolated motion. The hips holding and supporting, hips and shoulders, definitely this big connection. And everything kind of breaks down to this little last point here is that I believe our body is intelligent. We have an innate intelligence. It's very smart. And we treat it like it's dumb. We throw pills at it, vaccines at it. We throw all these things at it. And we never actually want to listen to it. So it's giving us symptoms as warnings. And we get annoyed at these little symptoms, but they're like the tip of the iceberg of what the problem really is. Like we said with the spine, can have a lot of arthritis. We take an x-ray. The person has no idea. They didn't have pain there. They had pain in their knee. They're coming in because the doctor told them they had to get a knee replacement. They're trying some alternative stuff first. And we're like, man, look at the spine. It's almost like they don't even believe you. It's like, well, the knee is the problem. Can you like relocate the knee? But the knee it's the hip. It's the pelvis. It's the spine. It's everything that's gone wrong for years and years and years. 30,000 breaths done wrong times 20, 30, 40 years. Bending 4,000 times a day times 30, 40 years adds up. A couple hours in the gym is not going to change it. We have to retrain ourselves how to move. So can we improve upon the day-to-day? I believe we can. All those things we just mentioned. And untraining is the big thing. So we can't just think posture. I thought I knew how to move correctly, but I was in pain all the time, and it just kind of hit me like, maybe you don't really know. Maybe what you were taught didn't cover exactly everything, or maybe I was just sleeping in class. But Dr. Goodman, the Creator Foundation training, a lot of this runs in the same vein, same story. He was a personal trainer, he was a chiropractor, told he had to get disc surgery. He's like, I thought I knew how to move. But it can't be that I know how to move, because why would this degeneration be there, right? We must be doing something wrong. And what's in bold there, comforts bring with them curses. It's just the epiphany I had that like in society, everything is kind of easy for us. A lot of sitting, flat surfaces, we wear shoes. I'm not saying to run out and go barefoot, but that gripping and grabbing, that iliopsoas, that hip flexor engagement, where we would guide the heel strike. Now we don't need to. And the hips tend to slide forward. The foundation slips forward, like we've seen so many people. Spine is compressed, so we don't take proper breaths. We don't bend correctly. We don't sit correctly. And that adds up over time. So all these little comforts that we've brought into our life to make things easier for us have actually really weakened our bodies. So we need to get back that strength. And it's not about running around barefoot. That stuff is, you can get into that, and that's cool, but you still have to retrain yourself to move correctly. Like those barefoot shoes, if you still take the improper way of thinking about movement, you're just going to hurt your feet with those shoes. You have to retrain yourself to, guide your stride and use the arches of your feet, not just supporting all the time. Think like ankle and arch support is the same way as back support. In the long run, it works against you. It might give you some symptom relief, right? relieves the symptom, but it's not actually strengthening anything. It's just holding something there. So we can overcome our comfortable surroundings. It just takes practice and time. And these exercises are a way to do that. Doing them in the morning, it sets your day because you're engaging those weak muscles. You're getting your brain to talk to them for once, and you're actually stretching some of those tight muscles and pushing out against those joint restrictions. So your body will want to move better. It's not going to play to its dominances. So the training is going to kick in the more we practice. Just like any good Army veteran will tell you, you train for that 30-second window where we're going to hesitate. It's going to kick in. You're going to do it automatically. Not saying you're going to war here, but some people view it. It's like every day you're getting up, going to battle. All right, guys, that is it for today. Next time we're going to talk about the breathing muscles, the serratus muscles that we worked on in that breathing cycle, because those are just going to keep reappearing with all these exercises. Breathing is the big decompression breaths that we take in all these exercises. Really important, and so is that anchoring. So don't be waiting for the next best, bigger exercise video. Repeat that one. We'll get to other fun stuff soon.